Tell me what you're thinking about your potential life-changing direction.
Well, I wouldn't go that far quite yet. What I would say is one of the questions that I had asked a previous boss at one point in time was the possibility of relocation. At the time, we were talking about internationally to potentially Italy. I know we've talked about this before, is that Don and all the kids all have Italian passports. So, for what that means for us, is that opens the door for anywhere in the EU that we could potentially move to. And she has even the opportunity to work in. There's the path of me moving. I have a path to citizenship in Italy if I were to pass a fluency exam, a B2 fluency exam. But long story short, to answer your question, one of the things at the time I was told yes previously, and then it was kind of yanked at the 11th hour and told no. Well, now I have a new boss as of April of last year, and so I figure the answer is always going to be no if you don't ask. So I may ask again and see what is said and be able to know that this is an experience that I think that we as a family really want to have, to just give our kids the opportunity and experience to see a different culture, learn a new language. So we're not saying forever or anything like that, but yeah, that may be something that I potentially bring up with work this year, and just with the benefit of knowing that, hey, if they really didn't like it, I mean, what's the worst that they can say? They can tell me no, and if they got really nervous, they could let me go or whatever. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference because I'm that close to retiring early.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was going to ask if you were thinking about doing this pre-fi, and it sounds like that's the direction you guys are headed. So you're not thinking about, obviously, given the fact that you're wanting to continue to work, you're wanting to do it sooner rather than later.
By no means do we have a timeline or anything else like that, but yeah, I mean that would be truly the best of both worlds, is if we could move and truly geo-arbitrage where, hey, if I can continue to get paid my US salary, I go live in a lower cost of living area. Yeah, I mean that would be perfect. Now, we'll see. Like I said, they could very easily come back and say no, and then this may still be something that we do down the line regardless, but then we wouldn't have the constraint of work and having to get somebody else's blessing to say, yeah, you can do this.
Yeah, that's really cool. That sounds really exciting. Has anything changed recently that's kind of caused you guys to start thinking about that again and look at those opportunities?
A couple of different things. So we really want to get the kids there. The sooner the better. That's easier for them to acclimate to a different language, learn a different language. We'd like to enroll them in just normal school there. So the fact that my sons and my daughter are just learning to read. You go put them in another country and say learn a new language. Hey, that's not vastly different than where they are, learning English. So obviously, we can teach them English much easier than we could teach them French or Italian or German or whatever. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons. I think another reason is definitely the climate, the political climate of the US right now. Frankly, we're not real pleased with the things that are happening in this country politically. Now, I'm not one to go read the headlines and say that it's terrorizing my every single day, but I think it is making an impact on people in this country. And while that hasn't directly, I would say, been us beyond maybe our pocketbooks at the grocery store or things like that, yeah, things like bombing other countries and our kids having to endure active shooter drills in kindergarten. That's a scary thing, and that's a thing that other countries, especially other developed countries throughout the world, don't
Yeah.
don't have these same problems.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I was thinking as you were saying that about my son's situation. My youngest son, he has been kind of trying to figure life out at 20 years old. And when I left full-time work back in April, he was on my insurance, which I had the whole family covered. And we went to Lori's insurance plan, which was going to be significantly more expensive to insure the whole family. So where we're impacted currently is that we moved Landon over to the Affordable Care Act insurance and found him something on there that was, I mean, it was like $20 a month. It was very minimal. And his employment status has changed a little bit. So we've been submitting, Lori's been in the process of submitting information back. And then now, like, all the subsidies have been cut or slashed dramatically to the point where now they're saying that he needs to pay, at one point it was 400 and something dollars a month, and then it dropped down to like 250 or something like that. And but it's just for a person that's making just a couple $1,000s a month and doesn't have access through their current employment for health insurance. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, wow. I mean, we all knew this was, the potential was here and that it was going to be coming, but to really see it and live it and try to navigate through it, it's been a challenge for sure. And I know it's impacting obviously a lot of people. So yeah, I don't blame you if you have other options to pursue those and see what else is available out there.
Right. I mean, I know that when Dawn and myself did our case study for our local chapter, right, I mean, I know that we have the superpower of being able to just pull the proverbial escape hatch and run off wherever we really want to go in the EU. And that's not true for a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the common problems, or not even problems, but I would say concerns that people have in FI, for, you know, to put it bluntly, are kind of solved in the EU. Is healthcare, and for us, I mean, education costs is a huge question mark, right? If our kids are going to go to college, you know, how much we should save. Like, of course, that cost, just, if history means anything in this country, then those costs are just going to continue to escalate. I mean, the rise of AI continues to show that even, you know, anything that is focused around a person doing a job, that cost is going to continue to increase because, like, you still have to have that person. So I can't imagine that the cost of education is going to be dropping anytime soon in this country. And it's much more affordable in other parts of the world that we're specifically looking at.
I'm curious, as you're saying that, and some of the two biggest costs that you were looking at covering in your timeline when you get to FI would be, like you said, healthcare and college. Have you experimented or looked at the numbers to see if how much closer you might be if you didn't have those two expenses in your future?
Don't tempt me with a good time, Josh. No, I imagine that's almost, it's scary to, maybe not scary is the wrong word, but it's probably like, okay, if we were just going to go move to one of these countries, we could probably just call ourselves FI right now
Wow.
and be done. I'm willing to bet. You know, now, of course, this is hearsay based off of the very limited research that we've done, listening to other people in YouTube land that has shared expenses and whatever else. But some of the numbers that were being thrown out, just for perspective, you know, there were 3 different families throughout France that we were looking at last night. Each and every one, you know, could range, let's just say the median was probably pretty close to $50,000. So that's half of our expenses for today, or pretty close, right?
It's really interesting too. I'm thinking about how we're in this current situation, however we want to look at it from a geopolitical or whatever standpoint. I'm sure there are still people that are trying to actively pursue citizenship or migrating into the US. But if you look at 20, 25 years ago, and I have friends that have moved here from the EU to pursue a better financial situation or better lifestyle. Here we are, or you are, like looking at the potential for going the other way. And that's just really interesting how things have, and I mean, of course, we're just a couple of small examples, but it's interesting how, things have maybe changed so dramatically in the last 20 and 25 years.
I think, once again, I'm coming from a place of complete privilege from the sacrifices that we've made to follow down this path of FI. And we know that's not really this grand sacrifice. That's just being intentional with your spending, whatever you're saving. However, that's not to say that if you go look at the median salary in some of those developed European countries, I mean, it is significantly lower. So I think the statistics that I saw in one video, right, is maybe the median salary in the US is like 77,000, which seemed pretty high to me. But even then, sure. In France specifically, it was something like 40, it was in the mid 40s. So, I mean, once again, it's nearly half of what it is in the US. But in my specific example, right, I went and got that good US money, and then if I run off with the benefit of, hey, I have my pile of money and I don't need to go live, or I don't need to go work in that specific workforce there, I think that's, I mean, that is geo-arbitrage,
Yeah.
right? Is where you've got the money in one location and it's going much further in another.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't think about it, I guess, completely from that perspective, but yeah, those same individuals could just potentially come to the US and work for 15 years or so and then go back and live a much better lifestyle than they would have been able to potentially had they worked those 15 years in the EU.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I try and put it, I mean, it certainly is a thought experiment that I have even for myself, right? Is okay, if we made this choice for our family to move, and let's say it wasn't just like a year or two, if it was longer term, am I putting my kids at a disadvantage by going to these institutions? Like everybody puts this gold standard on American education or different schooling. Does that put them at a strong disadvantage comparatively? I don't think that it does necessarily. And like I said, just because, let's say, if they were to go through any international schooling, that doesn't prevent them from going back to the U.S. for college or doing whatever. But at least they've got the optionality of knowing that they can make those choices, not being feeling constrained by those choices either.
Well, that's cool. I'm happy for you. That's exciting that you guys
Yeah.
are at least pursuing that and thinking through it and taking the next steps. And sounds like you're going to be talking to your employer in the not too distant future.
Yeah, well, we'll see. As long as I don't see any downside to bringing it up.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm thinking many, many steps down the road here, but what would the time zone difference be? How many hours ahead are they?
It would depend, and I don't know for sure. I think the short answer from what I know of working with people in those areas or thereabouts from work is 6 to 7 hours basically is the time difference.
That's what I thought. Yeah, we had a plant in Molsheim, France, and that's where my boss's boss resided. And we met very frequently. So there was definitely some overlap. And
Yeah.
I think it was about 6 hours. So I'm just thinking about
So
this
there you go.
podcast.
10 o'clock would just be 4 o'clock in the afternoon over there, right?
Yeah.
4 or 5 o'clock.
I don't want to be having these conversations at 10 p.m. though, Elliot. Unless
No,
you're
no,
talking.
no. I'm saying your 10 a.m. would be my 5 p.m. theoretically.
Oh, yeah, we can make that work. Yeah,
Yeah. You always want your early mornings, so.
that's right. I do.